So hi Adele. So we're on lesson 2 in your book, and we're going to go over the skeletal system. So we already went over the different properties of bones, and now we're going to get into the specific bones in your body. So let's begin. Broken bones and casts. Well, God's creation repairs themselves and man do not, which means your bones do repair themselves. Your body is specifically designed to fix itself, heal itself. And you wonder why people then have to wear casts? Well, a cast holds the bone in place, pushing the bones closer so that they can heal faster. It keeps bones from hurting when the bones move around. So bones in ancient cultures, made splints of cloth and tree bark or linen, or stiffened the linen with wax or an egg whites or flour or starch on the linen so that they could make a splint so that the broken bone could heal and wouldn't move around. Eventually, we started using what's called plaster of Paris. And so the bones would look like a plaster. But today, we use fiberglass because it's lighter and more durable and faster to apply. It's a broken bones and casts. Now, how does a bone heal? If a bone is injured, it bleeds. It does. And the blood settles between the bones. The periosteum, remember what the periosteum is? That's the outside of the bone, bulges out, and then this clot forms inside of the bone. Osteoblasts, remember osteoblasts, they're the bone. Osteo means bone, bone blasts means they're the bone makers. Come into the clot and start making new bones. The bone fills in the space between the bones, but then it bulges out a bit, and this bulge is called a callus. Over time, the osteoblasts absorb the callus, and then the bone looks pretty similar to the original. Isn't that pretty neat how a bone heals? So the bone is injured, blood settles between the bones, and the periosteum bulges out, and the osteoblasts come into the clot there, and they start making new bone, and then the bone fills in the space and basically into a callus, and then the osteoblasts absorb the callus. So it's the way God has in healing our bones. Bone basics. Bones are different shapes and different sizes. Guess what your longest bone is? Let's look at the skeleton. You can look at the skeleton. As you look, you'll see, oh, your legs, right? Correct. The femur is your thigh bone, and it's your longest bone. Now, the tiny bones, where would you think these tiny bones would be? Well, think about your ear. In your ear, you have 3 tiny bones: the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. Here's some pictures of these tiny bones in your ear. And the stapes are the tiniest. So here's how tiny they are. Look at this finger, a person's finger there, and there's how tiny these tiny bones are in your ear. Very tiny. So long bones are usually longer than they are wide, like the femur. And then there's short bones. And short bones sometimes have the same height and width, like your ankle and wrist bone. They have the same, they're kind of like square. They're the same height and width. So on both sides. So those are called short bones. And then you have flat bones. These are like bones in your skull that are completely flat. There's also bones in your sternum and your ribs that are completely flat. Sesamoid bones are small and rounded, like small little stones. See, they're tiny bones that are in your hands and in the patella of your kneecap. They're called sesamoid bones because they're round and small, kind of like sesame seeds, but a little bigger than that, of course. And then we have irregular bones that, like the vertebrae, that don't really appear to fit in any other category. They're just irregular. So, just know bones have different shapes and different sizes. Connecting the bones. Have you ever heard this song? Ezekiel cried out. This is in your Bible in Ezekiel 36. Ezekiel cried out, "Dem dry bones, oh, hear the word of the Lord. The toe bone connected to the heel bone connected to the foot bone connected to the leg bone connected to the knee bone connected to the thigh bone connected to the backbone connected to the neck bone connected to the head bone. Oh, hear the word of the Lord." Anyway, it's a song. I didn't sing it really correctly, but it's in Ezekiel, because Ezekiel found this whole valley of dry bones, but then God breathed life in the bones. Like God breathes life into us. So, but there's one bone that's not connected to any other bones. This is like a trivia pursuit. What bone in your body is not connected to any other bone? And it's called the hyoid bone, and it's in your neck. It just kind of floats there. It's not. So most of the bones are connected to another bone, right? Ligaments. Ligaments are special tissues connecting bones. And they're made of collagen. Remember, we talked about this tough collagen, these fibers that hold the bones in place at the joints. These are ligaments. They limit the joint's motion, but they do stretch a little bit. So they allow bones to move further apart for a brief time before they snap back into place. Ligaments, they're connecting bones. So ligaments connect bones. They're not bones per se, they're ligaments. Bones are connected so they affect each other. Did you know that you can get a concussion in your brain by falling on your tailbone? You can. So if you fall on your tailbone's connected to the other bones, and it can cause all your other bones to bounce up against each other all the way up to your skull and have a concussion from falling on your tailbone. It happens sometimes. But each bone is connected by, and here's some pictures of ligaments, by these ligaments, and you have a lot of them. Here's a picture of a ligament between, this looked like a fibula or a leg bone right here, so you can see, and then it's patellas right there and how the ligament works there. Ahead of the game, so your cranium. So we're talking about your skull. Cranium protects your brain. It feels like it's just one flat bone, but actually it's 8 bones. It's important because they cover your brain, of course. These bones fit very tightly together. Though your cranium does not move, they're not like joints, they fit. These lines where the bones meet are called sutures, and they don't move at all. And baby sutures allow for brain growth. That's how come a baby's head is a lot smaller. As the baby grows, of course, these sutures allow for your brain to grow, the baby's brain to grow. As the brain grows, the cranium grows by being gently pushed outwards. And this way, it's always protected in its coat of armor. So here's all these different bones. There's, what did I say? 8 bones. We have listed here these bones: the frontal bone, the parietal bone, the temporal bone, the occipital bone, onto the lacrimal bone, and all of these bones being, as you can see here, and how they suture together with these suture joints. They're called suture joints. So, facial bones. You have 14 bones in your face. All except one are attached to the other bones with a suture joint. In all of these, only one bone moves. So you have all these bones here, but which one moves? Can you guess? The lower mandible. When you talk, your mandible moves up and down to move your mouth. The 3 smallest bones are in your ear. We went over that. The malleus, which is like a hammer. The incus is like an anvil, and the stapes are stirrups. These are these tiny ear bones. And then your facial bones have hollowed out cavities in the bones that are called sinuses. These are like holes in your head. And this makes, the sinuses make your head a lot lighter. And they also lined with special cells called mucus. And that's why when you get a cold, you might get a sinus infection in that area with your mucus, a bad cold. And this makes your nose to start running, right? So let's face it. You have 14 bones in your face. Only one. Which one? Mandible moves up and down. And then the tiny bones in your ear are part of your facial, and onto your sinuses are like holes. Holes in your head there where that make your head lighter and are lined with mucus. Shivers down your spine. Now we're talking about your spine. Vertebrae, they're called, and they're in the spinal column, or they call it the vertebral column, your backbone. They are very good with hard bumps because they can move a lot, and they like a donut in the middle. In the middle is your spinal column, and it has like a donut. See, here's a picture right here, like a donut hole, so. The neck has 7 cervical. So here's your 7 cervical bones. There's 12 in your thoracial area. The thorax area, that's your chest area. It's actually the back of your chest, of course. And then down into your lower 5 lumbar vertebrae that go down into your sacrum and your coccyx, which is your tailbone. So we have how many? We have 7 neck bones. We have 12 thoracic bones. And we have 5 lumbar bones. So the inside the donut hole of each of the vertebrae is your spinal cord. And the spinal cord is an important part of the nervous system, which allows you to feel, walk, move, and talk. The spinal column is so important. And it can move in many directions, and still it's protected. 24 vertebrae have cartilage discs between them for shock absorbing. So each one of these discs has a little shock absorber inside. So it's very important. Then of course the bottom, the sacrum and the coccyx are made of flattened vertebrae joined together, the bottom, so to actually it protects by being more flat as the flattened bones of your tailbone. So definitely spine, as the spine has each one having shock absorbers, and you can move your back in that way. And it protects your most important spinal cord. Baby back ribs. So we're going to talk about ribs. Most people have as many ribs as vertebrae, but some even people have more. Your ribs guard your heart and your lungs. You can see that, guarding your heart and your lungs. And it's like a God's cage designed to protect those most important organs in your body. The rib cage gets bigger and smaller with each breath. So that's pretty amazing. See the cartilage here. So when you breathe, your ribs can get bigger. Exhale and get smaller. So it allows for you to breathe. Isn't it wonderful how God made us? Amazing. So because your ribs are attached to your sternum, right here, your ribs are attached to your sternum and your costal cartilage. This enables much movement. This, of course, we know expands when you breathe. In the back of your ribs attached to the thoracic vertebrae. So 7 of your ribs are true ribs that attach to the sternum, and 5 are called false ribs. And 3 of these have cartilage attaching to the 6th and 7th ribs. The last 2 are floating ribs because they are not attached to the sternum. So now we're talking about ribs. See, the last 2 at the end, they're just floating. And then the first 7 are the true ribs, and then you have 5 ribs that have cartilage attaching, so they're not considered. So here we go. So what did I say? 7 of your ribs up here are the true ribs, and then you have like 5 ribs. 5 ribs have cartilage only attaching to the 6th and 7th rib. And then we have the floating ribs at the bottom. So, and some people actually have more ribs than others. And it's kind of weird. Men usually have more than women. And that's kind of like in the Garden of Eden, because God took one of man's ribs. I don't know if it's men or women that have more ribs, but that's kind of I'm not sure if that's totally true, but it probably is. A peck of peppers. So we're talking now about your pectoral muscles, and there's sometimes called your pecs. You know, if you go to work out and I say, well, you know, I got these big pecs here, you know, work out muscles. And they are connected to the pectoral girdle. Your pectoral girdle connects your arms to your sternum or your chest. A girdle means belt, right? So this is the pectoral girdle, is like a belt of bones around your chest and back. It includes the scapula, 2 shoulder blades, and 2 clavicles and collarbones. So we have the scapula, we have the shoulder blade, which are the 2 shoulder blades here, scapula, and we have the 2 clavicles, and which are collarbones. So scapula and collarbones, which are clavicles. Just remember scapula and clavicle on both sides. Here's another picture of their pectoral girdle. Armed and dangerous. So we're talking about your arms now. So your arms are long bones. They're usually longer than wide. The first top of the bone here, the top part is called the humerus. You know, so, and that's your first arm bone up here, humerus. And then you have 2 bones in your wrist bones, 2 bones. You have the radius. You always know which one's a radius because it comes to your thumb. So here's the radius, attaches to your thumb. And then the ulna, the other side, the other bone, they're about the same size, attaches to your pinky. So just think ulna, pinky, radius, thumb. And those are the 2 bones in your lower arm. And the upper arm is called the humerus. Hands. There are 8 short bones in your wrist, and they're called carpals or metacarpals. But the metacarpals are, they look like fingers more. See how these here look like fingers? Although when you look at your hand, you can see them coming through. So they're not fingers, but they look like part of your fingers, and these are called metacarpals. So digits are your real fingers, and the bones in your digits are called phalanges. So there are 3 phalanges in each digit except your thumb. Your thumb only had 2. So here's you got the phalanges. Let's look at here. So you have the middle phalanges right here. You have the top phalange. As you go here, here's the metacarpals. So you have metacarpals, then 1, 2, 3 phalanges bones. See how amazing it is that our hands are made in such a way that we have lots of dexterity in our hand, movement in our hand, and be able to pick up tiny objects and everything with our thumb. And thumb only has 2 phalanges, but as for your fingers, they have 1, 2, 3 phalanges. And then of course these look like phalanges, but they're metacarpals. So, and then of course here's the carpals. So hands were pretty complicated, aren't they? Girdles around. Now we're going to go to another girdle, but this one is more like a girdle because it's your pelvic girdle. So another girdle is just below your waist. This pelvic girdle, like the pectoral girdle is, but it's larger and stronger than your pectoral girdle. It's designed to bear a lot of weight and to support you as you run, jump, and climb. Your legs attach to the pelvic girdle. And it also connects to your vertebral column, you know, your spine, your backbone. It connects your hips, your sacrum, and your tailbone. Your tailbone is called coccyx. If you want to know, a scientific term for tailbone is coccyx. And hips are called your coccyx. So here we have a picture. This is your pelvic bone. Here's where your coccyx, your tailbone is, and your coccyx. Here's your hips, as you can see that. And this is your pelvic girdle and all the parts of it and all the bones in your pelvic girdle. The last leg, we're talking about the leg now. The femur is the upper part of your leg, and it's the longest bone in your body. So your thigh, that's your femur. In the lower leg, you have 2 bones. You have the tibia and the fibula. And the tibia is larger. So you have a smaller one. This fibula is the small bone on the outside. And then you have the tibia on the inside, which is a larger bone. Here's another picture of it as you look on your leg. Foot bones. Foot bones are made of tarsals and metatarsals. Remember, in the hands we called them carpals and metacarpals. Well, in the foot, just like you think of toe on the foot, is a tarsal instead of a carpal. So you have foot bones are made of tarsals and metatarsals. There's 7 tarsals in your foot, including your calcaneus or your heel bone. That's here. This is the heel bone. Is called your calculus, or calcaneus, I should say, heel bone. You have metatarsals. They look like toes, but they're part of your foot, same like your hand. And like your fingers, your toes are called phalanges with a PH, phalanges. There are 27 bones in your hand and 26 bones in your foot. And altogether, we have 106 bones, important bones. And there are 206 bones in your whole body. So a lot of the bones are what? Your foot and hand bones, right? So what we want to take, as we look here, we have 7 tarsals in your foot, and that's including your heel here. So this is the tarsals when we talk. Then we have the metatarsals that kind of look like toes, but they're not quite toes, but they're called meta. And like your fingers, your toes are called phalanges. Same. So here we have a picture of that. Here's a foot, and you can look at the different bones with the tarsals, the metatarsals, and the phalanges. Joint venture. Without joints, you'd be a statue, wouldn't you? You wouldn't be able to move if you had any joints. Joints are the places the bones meet. Some joints allow a lot of movement, and others allow a little bit of movement, and some don't allow any movement. Suture joints, remember we talked about suture joints in your skull? They don't move at all. There is this fluid called synovial fluid that connects or collects, I should say, in joints that move to allow it to move easy. So you'll have this fluid in your joints. It's really important that you keep this fluid, and it uses as a shock absorber too. It's like a lotion. It prevents frictions and prevents heat. You know, if 2 bones were rubbing together, it would cause a lot of heat and hurt and friction, right? So frictions caused by this rubbing would harm the bones. Arthritis, in fact, is a disease where the synovial fluid is very thin and very weak, and it causes people with arthritis to have a lot of pain in between their bones because they're missing this fluid. And it's very painful to move if the fluid's not there. So let's look at these joints here. So here's what the fluid is in between your joints, and the synovial fluid is very important. And here's the different types of joints. Well, let's look a little bit more at these types of joints. Here's the kinds of joints, and we're going to end up with this. There's different kinds of joints. There's hinge joints. Let's look over here. Here's a hinge joint, and it's in your elbows and in your knees, like a hinge. It opens like a hinge opens. It offers a limited range, but it's very, very, very stable. So here's a hinge joint. It's like bending your elbow there, right? That's hinge. Then you have the ball and socket joints. The ball and socket joints are in your hips and your shoulders, and they offer a wide range of movement all round about these ball and socket joints. Here's a picture of a ball and socket joint, and that's in your shoulder there, you can see. The saddle joints, there's the ankle, and the range of motion is less than a ball and socket, but more than a hinge. So here's a saddle joint here, and that's in the arm area here, but it's also in your ankle. Pivot joints, when you shake your head, here's a pivot in your neck. You shake your head and say, no, yes, no, yes. And when you're saying no, actually, the pivot joint connects your skull to your vertebrae column. And then you have sliding joints, and these are vertebrae that connect with sliding joints, allowing them to bend and twist on your back. So we have the sliding joints there too. Let's see, gliding or sliding joints. So, and then we have ellipsoid joints, and these joints that connect your phalanges to your metacarpals, and they're flattened, and they're like a ball and socket joints, but they're flattened. So, and they call another name for ellipsoid, they call condyloid, so joints there. So these are the different kinds of joints. So I think we're going to end right there. So I hope that you got a lot of information about your skeleton. It's actually fun because now we know all the different kinds of bones in our body and our joints and our cartilage and our different osteoblasts and osteoclasts, the bone cells. It's all important. So you learned quite a bit. So I'm excited. You could go to your picture in your book and you can actually look at all the different kinds of bones and what they're called and then relate them to your body, your skeleton in your body. So that ends our chapter.